Welcome kids, session 8 of the Martin County Historical Society COVID-19 tour. We're wearing our masks, we're social distancing. This is 2020, we're in the midst of a pandemic, so we want to be as careful as possible. Now, we have a number of different items in this room. This is called Carlson Room, named after Walter Carlson, a well-known historian from Tremont in about the 1960s. And what we have over here on the right is a jail cell from Martin County. And we have also a uniform of a Fairmont police officer, a complete uniform. And that uniform was donated, everything from the cap down to the shoes, including a pistol that's not real, but it's an exact replica. And Jim is going to be showing us the Model T Ford in a little bit, but I don't know where Jim went. Oh, by golly, Jim, what are you doing in jail?
This is what happens when you don't do your 5th grade homework.
Oh, man. You must have had a good 5th grade teacher then. Well, let's get you out of jail.
Oh, sure.
And we'll walk along here. There's a lot of unique items in this room. Their example here is a chicken catcher. And very simply, you come up behind the chicken, hook its leg in there, and then you get yourself a chicken. Now, moving along, there's a lot of interesting artifacts of agricultural displays here. And as we get over here to the Model T, we've got a number of large items in this room. And I think the Model T is a very unique and very interesting replica of an automobile.
Yeah, so this Model T Ford is from 1914, so it makes it 106 years old. Today we've got all sorts of cars, SUVs, trucks. This is one of the early models of automobile. Its top speed was not very much, as you can see. The steering wheel, the headlights, this is all very old technology. But this is how people started the automobile craze. At the time, it was thought of as a trend, and there were, believe it or not, there were people that didn't think cars were going to catch on to become the big industry that they are today. So, and if you come over here to Lenny, he'll show you an even earlier form of transportation.
Yeah, before we had automobiles, motorized vehicles, we had buggies and surreys. And here's an example of one on the right, and there's another one here on the left. They were horse-drawn, and they were used to take the passengers or the owners into town or wherever they wanted to go. There weren't engines, there weren't automobiles at the time, so that's what they used. All right, over here is a very unique item that I would guess most of you have never seen before unless you've been in the museum. It's called an iron lung. Back in the 1950s and before, and actually into the 60s, there was a disease called polio. And that was a crippling disease, and people that it sometimes affected their lungs, and if it did, they were sometimes put into what's called an iron lung to help them breathe. They'd be entirely in the iron lung, and their head would be able to be come out of it right here, so they could eat and drink water and so on. Okay, moving over here, one of the most unique items in the museum, in my opinion at least, is the American Lafrance 1923 Firetruck. This was the first motorized fire truck in Fairmont, Minnesota. It came from Buffalo, New York. They actually brought somebody out from Buffalo, New York to show them how to operate the fire truck. Had a couple of questions about the fire truck. Brooklyn asked what fire gear did the firemen wear? They wore, we'll see some of those with their uniforms as we move back over here. They wore hard hats, and they wore a rubberized jacket to keep them dry from the water. Ella asked why is the shape of the fire truck different? Well, that's technology and the way things have progressed throughout the years. This was 1923, so we're talking, nearly 100 years ago. The front of the truck You can see we've got large headlights. We've got another large lamp up there by the driver's seat. One person asked, why is there a bell in the front of the truck? And I think that was just for signaling. You know, they might not have had sirens at that time, so that's to let people know that the fire truck is coming. Okay, then we'll go back over here and we'll take a look at the back of the fire truck and also some of the uniforms that the firemen wore. Okay, the person that had a question about what they wore, here's an example, a hard hat. Whoops, I knocked it off. And a kind of a rubberized material so they would keep dry fighting the fires. And there were the dress uniforms on the wall.
And Lenny, I'd just like to point out one of my favorite items in the museum. I don't know, can we get a picture of that? Kids, do you like to play with water balloons? Well, this is an early form of a fire extinguisher that was like a glass water balloon that you would throw at the base of a fire, and chemical would try to put it out quickly. So now we have fire extinguishers and fire hoses. This is a very early form of fire suppression. I think a glass water balloon to me is kind of fun.
Yeah, really. If you look at the picture there, that's Harry Searle. He was, I believe, the first fire chief in Fairmont. He was a very influential person in the early 1900s in Fairmont and Martin County. Okay, moving back down this way, there are some other examples of firemen's gear. And we're going to move to the KSUM display. And Jim's going to tell us a little bit about that. KSUM was the first radio station in Fairmont, not the first one in Martin County, but the first one in Fairmont.
That's right. The first...
in 1948, I believe, is when they started.
That's right. And you can see here, these are some big, powerful speakers that they would have used. Also some different advertising signs. We think of a lot of radios these days, maybe as boom boxes. Maybe that even term is even too old for you kids. Here are some different radios that have been used throughout the years.
And Riley had a question about that.
Sure.
Riley wondered, how old would those radios be?
That's a great question. Well, a lot of these are pretty old. This one here is 1942. So there you're looking at probably 80 or so years old. A lot of these are about that old, maybe a little newer. This big guy down here with all the different knobs and things like that, that is 100 years old. So yeah, these date back quite a ways. Radio technology has changed. And a very good example of how radio technology has changed throughout the years is this big piece right here. This is the KSUM radio transmitter. When they started in the late 40s, this is what powered the radio signal so that people around the region could hear it. Nowadays, this is much smaller. The one they use today would fit in, maybe on a desk or so. This one took up an entire room. So that's a very big piece of Martin County history and radio technology. So glad to have that here. Yeah, go ahead.
Any more about the KSUM, Jim?
No, I don't think so. I think, KSUM turned into KFMC, so if you still listen to the radio today, you can still hear them on the airwaves.
Yeah, I'd like to point out one other thing right back over here, and that has to do with aviation in Martin County. And we have a display that shows much of the history of aviation in Martin County, and it's a very interesting display. Some examples are Cora Fuller. She was the first licensed female pilot, and she got her license by flying solo over Hall Lake. And the Fairmont Airport, we've got a history of the Fairmont Airport. And these displays just show a lot of historic aspects of aviation in Martin County. Do you have anything more you can think of about that?
Yeah, here's a fun trivia question. How many hours did Cora Fuller have to fly to get her pilot's license? Do you remember, Lenny?
What's it, 8 hours?
She had to fly 8 hours to get her pilot's license. Nowadays, that wouldn't, you wouldn't be able to take the test after 8 hours, I'll tell you that.
No, not at all. Here's an example of a propeller from a plane from Martin County. Do you have anything else you want to say about this room?
This is one of our biggest rooms. There's a lot to see here. We didn't really even scratch the surface with what we've got here, so hopefully when the coronavirus pandemic is over and we can get back to normal, when you stop down, make sure to come to this room. There's just a ton to see here. So thanks for joining us, kids.
This concludes session 8. We'll go on to session 9.